What's going on, folks? Mr. Colin Noir here again. So I wanted to kind of talk about something and get something off my chest, so to speak. So I've been advocating. I've been a gun advocate for about, I'll say a good 9 to 10 years now. And I remember when I first started my YouTube channel, it was really honestly, I started it to really more or less do gun reviews. Just because I'd reached a point where I felt like I wanted to start creating something of my own and give my own perspective about firearms, because I did kind of approach them from a different place. That being said, inevitably my actual YouTube page evolved into something a little bit more than that. And that's when the advocacy started happening, where, you know, we started having some of these mass shootings. And then I started to listen to some of the rhetoric coming from the other side. And when I say the other side, I mean anti-gunners or politicians who are pushing gun control agendas or what have you. And I remember when I made my first commentary-esque style video, and thinking at the time it was more or less just me kind of angry because none of it really made any sense. And I just felt that I was still a bit naive from the standpoint that I didn't quite understand the idea of why politicians were pushing for gun control and thinking that it was actually a good idea. The whole concept of them wanting to just amass more power and just to gain more control and didn't really have to do anything with saving lives didn't really strike me or come into my mind until later on. So at the time, I was just really frustrated because I'm like, all right, these people are in a position of power. They're clearly smart people because they are. I mean, they were politicians. They were educated. I don't understand how just this common sense aspect of firearm ownership and how guns aren't the problem doesn't register in their minds, and how they think adding more gun control laws to fix what they perceive to be a gun issue would do anything. So that's when I decided to make my first video addressing that, especially with respect to mass shooters, and understanding that it doesn't matter what laws you put in place. A mass shooter or someone who decides he wants to wake up that morning and kill a bunch of people, it's exactly what he's going to do. There isn't a sign on the window. There isn't a note. There isn't anything that's going to stop him from doing that except for another person being there with a firearm to stop him. Or if there's something that we can do beforehand, I don't know, somebody actually seeing him walk out the door with a bag of guns and knowing why he's going to do what he's going to do and stopping him in that sense. And I noticed that the more and more I listened to the rhetoric from the other side, there was just a complete and utter lack of accountability in terms of the individual. When these mass shootings would happen, all we would talk about was the gun. We would talk about what gun he used or the gun laws and why the gun laws are inadequate and why don't we have more laws to stop things like this from happening. But we never actually really talked about the actual person. And then when we did talk about the person, it was almost kind of like we were almost glorifying them in a sense. You know, we get into the deeper recesses of their mind and their history and their family background and all these things, stuff I really didn't care to learn about somebody who decided to kill a bunch of people that day. And then even outside of the idea of mass shootings, when you look at just gun violence in general, you know, there are always circumstances and environmental cues that play a bigger role in why the violence was happening outside of the fact that there was just merely a gun there. And yet, and still, there was never this kind of focus on accountability on the behalf of the individual that I thought should have been pretty pervasive with respect to this conversation. So more and more, I started to see this kind of purposeful kind of ignoring of, you know what, a person who goes out and kills somebody. It's that person we need to focus on. It's the behavior we need to focus on in order to find ways to stop something like this from happening. And that's when I started to understand that this was a ploy to gain more power. This was about controlling people. It wasn't actually about saving lives. The whole notion and idea of saving lives, or the rhetoric of saving lives, was just something that was said to get people to get on board with the idea of more gun control. And then inevitably, what I realized is they understood that more gun control laws won't stop anything. But what it did allow for was incrementally to allow them to implement more laws until they can completely and utterly strip us of our rights under the Second Amendment. The ultimate goal is to ban guns. That being said, what I decided to do at the time, and I started to understand and see the power of certain hashtag movements, so to speak, with respect to social media. And I started a campaign called Still Waiting. Now, how did Still Waiting come about? I remember thinking to myself, I was in my apartment at the time, and I just recently got this new watch. And I also just recently got this new gun. And the gun was sitting on the table, and I remember I was pretty proud of this watch, and it was supposed to be essentially an EDC picture, like my watch and the gun. And I remember taking the picture and looking at it and thinking, damn, you know what? That gun is just sitting there. And then here I am, I'm looking at the clock, and I see the gun just sitting there, and the whole time the gun hasn't moved. And so I thought, it's really interesting from the standpoint of, if you don't have an individual to interfere with the gun just sitting there, the gun's never going to do anything to hurt anyone, whether that be an accident, or that be somebody deliberately picking up the gun and using it to kill people. And so I thought, you know what? That is a pretty interesting concept from the standpoint of we have, generally speaking, only conversations about guns and never about the people. When you have somebody who is who drives while intoxicated and kills someone, we never have discussions about the car. We never talk about, oh man, that car was able to go 200 miles an hour or 180 miles an hour, or that the car inflicted all of this damage. We always hold the individual accountable. We hold that person responsible. We never focus on the car. The car was nothing more than a tool for somebody to be irresponsible with. But yet and still, when we talk about firearms, it's a totally different story. So I looked at it and I said, you know what? This would be a pretty cool hashtag. I'm looking at my watch, I'm looking at the gun, and I'm still here waiting. So I started off with spelling it STILL. And as I was typing it out, I thought, wait a minute, how do you spell still? It's a steel gun, the gun is steel, whatever the case may be. So I was like, okay, I fancy myself pretty clever. And I was like, oh, we're gonna call it Steel, STEEL, waiting. Still indicating the gun, waiting, referencing the time. And so I made that the hashtag, and then what the hashtag has become now is people tag their pictures of their watch or some timing device and their firearm sitting there doing nothing. And then along with that is the message that we don't hold inanimate objects accountable or responsible for things that we're supposed to hold people accountable for. And I think the more we start to hold people accountable for their actions, I think the better position we're going to be in to stop the violence that we see in this country. Because I think as long as we allow the gun to be the scapegoat, we never address the real issue. When we start talking about mass shootings, we'll never address the fact that maybe some of these individuals have a mental issue, or maybe some of these individuals on certain drugs they shouldn't be on that are causing them to do the things that they're doing. When we start talking about generalized violence and say in the inner cities, maybe there are certain circumstantial environmental reasons, maybe their conditions are causing them to do certain things that they're doing. Maybe not. I don't know. But the more we don't focus on any of those factors, the more this will continue to happen, because it's already been demonstrated that, hey, we've been focusing on a gun for decades. We're still dealing with the same issues. So that being said, I wanted people to send in pictures or tag me in pictures of still waiting. And then every day I wouldn't pull. Ambitiously, I thought I would be doing this every day. And I'd have them, I'd pick a picture and then I'd post it with the message of still waiting and a corresponding message that accompanied it. And to this day, it's still going. I was actually just only supposed to do it for 2016. It's 2017 now, and I've continued to keep it going. Now, am I actually posting every day? No, but that's because I run all my own social media, and sometimes I forget, I get busy, I get inundated, but I still tried to keep up with it to some degree. And I thought it'd be a good way to get the message out there to people who aren't in the gun community, people who don't understand the gun aspect of things, and get them to see a different side of it, get them to see the diversity within the gun community, and showing the different types of gun owners out there, because I think there's a really kind of one focus area when we talk about firearms and the type of people that they are, not realizing how complex and diverse the actual gun community is. So let's take a look at some of the pictures that people have submitted and I've actually posted over the course of this Still Waiting campaign.